We totally take for granted that incredible, intricate dance of airplanes in the sky, all managed by this, invisible system. But that system, it wasn't always there. So today, we're going to dive into the story of why we even had to invent air traffic control. It's a story of how a completely empty sky became dangerously crowded and how we were basically forced to come up with a way to manage all that chaos. It all kicks off right here. December 17th, 1903. A windy beach in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. The Wright Flyer gets off the ground for a whopping 12 seconds. Now, that was a massive achievement, right? But as this quote shows, pretty much nobody noticed. Nobody cared. The sky was just this huge empty space, and flying, it was just some weird little experiment. And that's the big question, isn't it? How in just a few decades did we go from one single lonely little plane to a sky so jam-packed it was becoming downright deadly? Well, the journey from that quiet beach to the airports we know today, it's an incredible story of technology, progress, and a whole lot of near disasters. All right, so part one, the age of C and B scene. The answer really begins in an era where the rules of the sky were, well, unbelievably simple, mainly because they could be. This whole period was governed by one principle, and it's this: see and be seen. The simplicity here is just amazing. The entire air traffic control system, the whole shebang, was basically just the pilot's eyeballs. Their one and only job, besides flying the plane, was to look out the window, see the other guy, and, not hit him. That's it. That was the system. And to make this whole see and be seen thing work, you really only needed two things. First, you had to stay out of the clouds, because obviously you can't see other planes if you're flying through a giant cotton ball. And second, you needed at least 3 miles of visibility. If you had those two things, you were good to go. And you know what? For a surprisingly long time, this was totally fine. I mean, the planes back then were pretty slow. There weren't all that many of them buzzing around. So as long as the sun was out and the weather was good, pilots could easily spot each other and just steer clear. The system, for what it was, actually worked. But then, technology changed everything. All of a sudden, pilots weren't stuck flying only in clear skies and during the day. They were quite literally flying blind into a brand new future, and all those old, simple rules were about to become dangerously useless. So what were these game changers? Well, it really boils down to two huge leaps. First, new instruments in the cockpit meant pilots could keep the plane level without even seeing the horizon. And second, new radio beacons on the ground, we call them nav aids, meant they could figure out where they were without seeing the ground. The old limits were just gone. Pilots could fly at night, straight through clouds, in weather that would have been a death sentence just years before. So you get this massive split. The old way of doing things was completely based on what a pilot could see out the window. This new way meant a pilot could fly an entire trip blind. The progress was mind-blowing, but it created this terrifying new problem. If you can't see the other planes, how in the world do you avoid hitting them? And this whole problem, it all came to a head in the most crowded, most dangerous piece of sky there is, the space right around an airport. All these planes, with their fancy new all-weather gear, were being funneled into the exact same small area with absolutely no system there to manage the traffic. So, just for a second, I want you to picture this. Forget about the modern airports you know, with their long paved runways and planes all lined up neatly. What did an airport in the 1930s actually look and feel like? Seriously, forget everything you know. Early airfields were often just these huge open fields of grass or maybe cinders. No designated runways. Pilots would just fly over, take a look at the wind, and literally pick a spot to land. It was pure, unadulterated chaos. A true Wild West in the sky. And here's the crazy part, something you probably wouldn't expect. Calm days were actually way more dangerous. See, on a windy day, pretty much everyone had to take off and land facing into the wind. That created a natural, predictable flow of traffic. But on a calm day, oh, it was a total free-for-all. You had planes landing and taking off in every possible direction, and the risk of a collision just shot through the roof. Okay, so you can see where this is going, right? This situation just could not last. The system, or really the total lack of a system, had hit its absolute breaking point. Something had to change before a real catastrophe happened.
And at the very heart of this problem was the person in the cockpit. The pilot was just swamped, completely overwhelmed. We had given them this incredible technology to fly through clouds, but we had totally failed to give them any tools to manage the new complexity that came along with it.
I mean, just imagine being that pilot. You're trying to land your plane, and at the same time, you have to spot every other aircraft, figure out who has the right of way, try to get in line behind somebody, time your approach perfectly so you don't run into them, and scan the ground for planes that are taxiing around. It was a high-stakes juggling act that was just impossible to sustain. And that really brings us to this conclusion right here. Everyone in aviation knew it was true. The pilots knew it, the airlines knew it, the airport managers knew it. This big experiment in just letting pilots sort it all out for themselves was over. Without some kind of guiding hand on the ground, the sky was only going to get more and more deadly. So what we're left with is this amazing paradox. The very same technology that gave us the miracle of modern flight, it also created a level of chaos that the technology itself just couldn't fix. And this raised a brand new, fundamental question. If the pilots couldn't manage the sky by themselves anymore, then who would? Who would own the sky? The answer to that question is what led to the birth of the entire system we all depend on today.